For days, he stood guard, never leaving his post beside the crib. No food, no water, only unwavering vigilance. But when the truth behind his actions surfaced, it left everyone speechless. The storm outside battered the old wooden house, rain cascading against the windows in relentless sheets. The wind howled through the trees, a wild symphony of chaos, yet inside, a quiet tension lingered. At the center of it all stood Rex, a German shepherd with a powerful frame, his black and tan fur bristling as he stared unblinkingly at the crib. His breath came in slow, steady intervals, his ears flicking at the slightest noise. Lena Carson, a young mother barely past her mid-20s, had never been one for superstition, but something about Rex's behavior unsettled her. He had always been protective of her infant son, Noah, but this was something else entirely. He refused to leave the nursery, his amber eyes locked onto the sleeping child as if expecting an unseen force to steal him away. Lena had adopted Rex nearly 4 years ago, back when she lived in the city. He had been a police K-9 once, trained for search and rescue, but a near-fatal injury had ended his service career. When she first met him at the shelter, he had been withdrawn, his body riddled with old scars, his spirit dimmed by past battles. But the moment she reached out to him, something changed. His eyes softened, and from that day on, he had been hers, fiercely loyal, unwaveringly protective, and now inexplicably distressed. She knelt beside him, running her fingers through the thick fur on his back. "Rex, what is it, boy?" she murmured. But he didn't respond. He remained rigid, unmoving, his muscles tense beneath her touch. It had started 3 nights ago. Rex had refused to leave Noah's room, positioning himself between the crib and the door like a sentry. At first, Lena thought it was just another display of his protective instincts. But then she noticed the changes. The way he barely touched his food, the restless pacing when she tried to pull him away, the low, guttural growl that rumbled in his chest whenever she stepped too close. It wasn't just vigilance, it was fear. Lena's hands trembled as she adjusted the baby blanket over Noah's tiny body. He was so small, so fragile, his little fingers curling in sleep. She had spent months preparing for his arrival, pouring every ounce of love she had into creating a home for him. And now, something felt wrong. Outside, a branch snapped in the wind, a sharp crack that sent a jolt of alarm through her veins. Rex's head whipped toward the window, his ears standing at full alert. The house was old, isolated on the outskirts of town, surrounded by dense woodland. It had once been her grandmother's, a place of warmth and childhood memories, but now, as the storm raged on, it felt less like a sanctuary and more like a fragile shelter against something unseen. Lena tried to shake off the unease. It was just the weather, the isolation, the exhaustion of new motherhood playing tricks on her mind. But as she looked back at Rex, at the way his body coiled with tension, a chilling thought crept in. What if it wasn't just in her head? A bond forged in shadows. Lena and Rex's bond had always been more than that of an owner and her pet. It was deeper, rooted in trust and mutual understanding. When she had first brought him home, he had been a shadow of the formidable protector he once was. His body bore the remnants of old wounds, both physical and emotional. Some nights she had heard him whimper in his sleep, reliving horrors she would never fully understand. But over time, she had given him something no one else had: love without expectation. Rex had repaid her tenfold. He had been there when she fell apart after Noah's father walked out, leaving her alone and pregnant. He had been there when exhaustion and loneliness weighed her down, nudging her with his nose, silently reminding her that she wasn't truly alone. And when Noah was born, Rex had taken his role as guardian more seriously than she ever expected. He had become Noah's silent protector, always close, always watching. But this was different. Lena rubbed her temples, exhaustion clouding her thoughts. She had barely slept in days, her nights spent between tending to Noah and worrying over Rex's strange behavior. The rational part of her wanted to believe it was nothing. Perhaps Rex was just adjusting to having a baby in the house. Perhaps the storm outside was simply unsettling him. But a deeper, primal instinct inside her whispered otherwise. A presence in the dark. The nursery was dimly lit, the soft glow of a nightlight casting gentle shadows on the walls. The storm outside had settled into a steady rhythm, the rain drumming against the roof like a lullaby. Lena exhaled, rising to her feet. "Come on, Rex, you need to eat." Rex didn't move. She sighed, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "Fine, but at least come downstairs with me." He flicked an ear, his eyes momentarily shifting toward her before snapping back to Noah. Lena turned to leave, but the moment she stepped out of the room, a deep guttural growl rumbled from behind her. She froze. Slowly, she turned back, her breath catching in her throat. Rex's entire body was tense, his hackles raised, his teeth bared as he stared at the far corner of the room. A chill slithered down her spine. The air in the nursery felt heavier, suffocating. It was as if something unseen had slithered into the room, its presence thick and oppressive. Lena swallowed, trying to steady her breathing. "Rex!" The dog's growl deepened, his stance shifting as if preparing to lunge. And then Noah stirred. Lena rushed to the crib, scooping her baby into her arms. His tiny face scrunched up before settling again, his warm weight grounding her in reality. It was just her imagination, just exhaustion twisting her thoughts. But Rex didn't waver. He remained rooted to the spot, his body a fortress of muscle and tension, his gaze still locked on that single empty corner. Lena felt it too, the suffocating sensation, the way the shadows seemed to stretch just a little too far. She shivered, holding Noah closer. Then, as suddenly as it came, the tension snapped. Rex let out a sharp bark, his body still rigid, but his growl subsiding into a low rumble. The room felt lighter, the unseen weight lifting just enough for Lena to breathe again. She let out a shaky laugh, pressing a kiss to Noah's forehead. "You're scaring me, boy." Rex didn't look away from the corner. Lena's pulse thrummed in her ears as she backed out of the room, cradling Noah protectively. She had spent her whole life trusting logic, dismissing fear as something to be conquered. But tonight, as Rex stood guard over her child, refusing to let the unseen darkness take another step closer, she wasn't so sure. Something was here, and Rex was ready to fight it. The storm raged on outside, its howling winds pressing against the house like an unseen force trying to claw its way in. The windows rattled in their frames, and the rain pounded the roof with an almost frantic rhythm. But inside the nursery, the real storm was silent. Rex hadn't moved from his spot beside the crib. His amber eyes glowed in the dim light, locked on the corner of the room. Lena's heart hammered as she backed away, clutching Noah protectively against her chest. She told herself it was nothing, just shadows and exhaustion playing tricks on her mind. But Rex's reaction made it impossible to ignore the deep-rooted fear curling in her stomach. She took a shaky breath, forcing herself to move. "Come on, Rex," she whispered. "Let's go downstairs." Rex didn't budge. His body remained tense, muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. His lips curled slightly, his breath heavy and controlled. Lena took another step back, adjusting Noah in her arms. "Rex, let's go," she tried again, her voice trembling. Then, in an instant, Rex lunged. A deep, snarling bark tore through the room as he leaped toward the darkened corner, his claws scraping against the wooden floor. Lena gasped, stumbling backward, her grip on Noah tightening. Rex's body collided with the wall, his teeth snapping at something she couldn't see. His growl was vicious, raw, a sound Lena had never heard from him before. The air shifted. It was subtle, but unmistakable. A chill swept through the nursery, the kind that seeped into the bones and whispered of something unnatural. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. Rex pulled back, his hackles still raised, his body still rigid with tension. He let out a low, warning growl, his head tilting slightly as if he were listening for something Lena couldn't hear. The nursery was silent once more, save for the soft sound of Noah's breathing. Lena let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling as she rocked her son gently. "Jesus, Rex," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her own heart. "What the hell was that?" Rex turned his head toward her, his expression unreadable. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped back from the wall and returned to his post beside the crib. Lena's legs felt weak beneath her body aching with exhaustion and fear. She needed to get out of this room. She forced herself to move, carefully stepping past Rex as she carried Noah toward the hallway. She hesitated at the door, glancing over her shoulder. Rex was still staring at that same spot. Lena swallowed the lump in her throat and stepped out of the nursery, flipping the light off as she went. A warning left unspoken. She made her way downstairs, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. Was she just imagining things? Could Rex really sense something she couldn't? And if so, what? The kitchen was dimly lit by the small bulb above the sink, casting long shadows across the room. Lena moved on autopilot, cradling Noah as she rocked him gently. She needed to clear her head. She moved toward the large glass door that led to the backyard, peering out into the storm. The trees swayed violently in the wind, their dark silhouettes twisting and writhing like living things. The fence that bordered the property creaked under the pressure of the storm, its wooden panels bending slightly. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the yard for a brief second, just long enough for Lena to see something that made her blood run cold. Footprints. Deep, muddy footprints leading from the tree line toward the house. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She blinked, her mind scrambling to rationalize what she had just seen. Maybe it was her own imagination. Maybe the storm had played a trick on her. But then the next flash of lightning struck, and the footprints were still there. A chill slithered down her spine as she slowly backed away from the glass. Her pulse pounded in her ears, her grip on Noah tightening. She wasn't imagining this. Someone had been here. Someone had walked straight up to her house. Rex's behavior suddenly made perfect sense. The unseen threat. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. She needed to call someone, anyone. But just as she unlocked the screen, a sound made her freeze, a soft creak from upstairs. The nursery. Lena's breath hitched. Number no. She turned, her body moving before her mind could catch up. Noah stirred slightly in her arms, sensing her distress. Another creak. Lena forced herself to breathe. It was just the house settling, just the storm, just a thud. This time, it was loud, directly above her. Rex's deep, furious bark exploded from upstairs. Lena's body went rigid. The air around her seemed to constrict, squeezing the breath from her lungs. There was no time to think. She bolted. Her feet barely touched the ground as she raced for the stairs, her heart hammering against her ribs. She nearly stumbled in her haste, gripping the railing tightly as she climbed 2 steps at a time. Rex's growls grew louder, more vicious. Lena reached the top of the stairs, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The nursery door was slightly ajar, the dim glow from the nightlight spilling into the hallway. Rex's massive form stood in the doorway, his body rigid, his teeth bared. His fur bristled as he let out another deep, guttural snarl. Lena forced herself forward, her legs shaking as she peered inside the nursery. It was empty. Nothing was there. Nothing but shadows and silence. Her heart pounded as she scanned the room. The crib, the rocking chair, the changing table. Everything was exactly as she had left it. So why did it feel so wrong? Why did Rex still seem ready to attack? Lena's breathing was uneven as she stepped forward. "Rex, what is it?" The dog didn't move. His eyes were locked on the crib, his entire body a wall of tension. Lena's gaze slowly followed his. The blankets were slightly shifted, as if something or someone had touched them. A lump formed in her throat. She reached out with a trembling hand, pulling the blanket back ever so slightly. The moment she did, Rex let out a bone-chilling bark, lunging forward. Lena stumbled back, clutching Noah to her chest. But there was nothing there. Nothing but the cold, empty air. Her vision swam as she tried to make sense of what was happening. The footprints outside, the sounds upstairs, Rex's reaction, the shift in the blankets. And then she saw it. The window. It was open. Not by much, just a crack. But she knew with absolute certainty that she hadn't left it that way. Lena's blood ran ice cold. Someone had been in her house. Someone had been in Noah's room. And Rex had known all along. Her stomach twisted as she stumbled backward, her entire body trembling. The storm howled outside, the wind rushing through the open window. Rex pressed himself against her side, his growl never subsiding. Lena swallowed hard, gripping her son tightly. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone. And now she knew the truth. The morning air was thick with unease. Though the storm had passed, leaving behind damp earth and the scent of pine, the tension inside Lena's home remained as heavy as ever. Rex stayed close to Noah, his presence like a living shield between the child and whatever had disturbed him the night before. Lena paced the living room, arms crossed tightly over her chest. The night had left her raw, her nerves frayed from exhaustion. Every creak of the house, every shadow shifting in the early light, sent an icy shiver down her spine. She had never been one to scare easily. But this was different. A sharp knock on the door made her jump. She hurried to open it, nearly stumbling over Rex, who had positioned himself between her and the entrance. His body was taut, ready. His protective instincts had been in overdrive since last night, and Lena could feel his tension like static in the air. She pulled the door open, exhaling in relief at the sight of Sam. Sam was in his early 30s, tall and broad-shouldered. With the worn look of someone who had spent years chasing things most people would rather pretend didn't exist. His brown eyes flickered over her, scanning, assessing, before settling on Rex. "What happened?" he asked, stepping inside. Lena shut the door behind him, rubbing a hand over her tired face. "I don't know. Rex won't leave Noah's side. He attacked the air last night, like he was fighting something invisible." Sam frowned, crouching down to Rex's level. The dog didn't move, didn't even acknowledge his former handler. His focus remained locked on Noah, who was curled up in a blanket on the couch, oblivious to the weight pressing down on the adults in the room. "Hey, buddy," Sam murmured, reaching out to scratch behind Rex's ear. Normally, Rex would have responded, maybe with a wag of his tail or a subtle lean into Sam's touch. But today, he stayed still, his amber eyes full of something Lena had never seen in him before. Fear. Sam's frown deepened. He looked up at Lena. "Describe exactly what happened." She swallowed hard. Rex was standing guard over the crib like usual, but then he started growling, really growling. I've never heard him sound like that. When I tried to get him to come downstairs, he wouldn't move. He just kept staring into the corner, like something was there. Sam exchanged a glance with her, his expression unreadable. "Did you see anything?" "No," Lena admitted, wrapping her arms around herself. "But I felt something. It was heavy, like the air had been sucked out of the room." She hesitated, then added, "And then, when I looked at the baby monitor, I swear, Sam, the shadows in the corner looked darker than they should have been." A muscle in Sam's jaw twitched. He stood, rubbing a hand over his stubbled chin as he stared at Rex. "And he attacked something?" "Yes. More than once." Lena nodded. "I pulled Noah out of the crib and tried to leave, But Rex wouldn't come with me at first. He lunged, snapped at nothing, like he was trying to drive something away. Then finally it was like whatever it was left, and we ran downstairs. Sam was quiet for a long moment. Then he exhaled sharply. "Okay," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I need you to tell me something, Lena. Has anything strange happened in this house before?" Lena blinked. "What? Number, I mean, it's old, and yeah, sometimes it creaks at night, but that's just the wood settling." Sam shook his head. "That's not what I mean." His gaze was sharp. "Has anything happened here? Anything unexplainable?" Lena opened her mouth to argue, but then she hesitated. Because there was something she had buried beneath logic and reason, dismissing it as coincidence or stress. The nights she had woken up to the baby monitor crackling with static, only to find Noah still fast asleep. The way Rex had always been drawn to the nursery, standing guard long before Noah was even born. The dreams, the ones she could never quite remember, but that always left her waking up cold, her skin clammy, her heart pounding. She had ignored it all, until now. Lena's voice was unsteady. I don't know. I never thought anything of it." Sam's jaw tightened. "You should have." He turned back to Rex, lowering himself onto his haunches. "All right, buddy," he murmured. "Show me." For the first time since Sam arrived, Rex moved. He turned away from Noah, his head lifting as he stepped carefully toward the stairs. His body was still rigid, his movements slow, cautious, but his ears were alert, his nose twitching as if following a scent only he could detect. Lena and Sam followed him, a cold weight settling in her stomach with every step. They reached the nursery door. Rex hesitated for just a moment before stepping inside. The room was the same as before, soft light, baby blankets, the faint scent of lavender from the humidifier. But the air was still thick, pressing. Rex moved with intent, sniffing along the edges of the crib, his muscles drawn tight. He paused at the far end of the room, and then he growled. Lena's pulse hammered. Sam stepped closer. "It's still here," he muttered under his breath. Lena shivered. "Sam, stop, there's nothing." But then Rex lunged. His bark was deafening, echoing off the walls as he bared his teeth, snapping at something unseen. His paws skidded against the floor as he launched himself toward the corner, teeth flashing, fur bristling. Lena sucked in a breath, stumbling back. Sam grabbed her arm, steadying her. And then the air shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Lena felt it in her bones. The room went colder, the nursery light flickering just slightly. The shadows in the corner, where Rex had been attacking, seemed to ripple, like something was moving within them. Rex snarled, his bark cutting through the oppressive silence. And then, just as suddenly as it came, the weight lifted. The air warmed. The light steadied. Rex took a slow step back, his growl fading into a soft whine. Lena's breath came in sharp gasps. She turned to Sam, her fingers digging into his arm. "What the hell was that?" Sam's expression was grim. "I don't know." Lena's knees felt weak. She clutched her arms around herself, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Sam, please. Tell me I'm just tired. Tell me I'm imagining this." He didn't. Instead, he looked down at Rex, who was still standing protectively between the crib and the now empty corner. And then he said the words that sent ice down her spine. "I think he just saved your son's life." Lena stood frozen, her breath coming in short, uneven gasps. The room around her, the nursery that once felt safe, warm, was now something else entirely. The shadows in the corner had returned to their normal shape. The air had lost its crushing weight, but the memory of it lingered. It wasn't her imagination. It wasn't just exhaustion. Something had been here. Something had been watching. Noah stirred in her arms, his tiny face scrunching before settling back into peaceful sleep. The thought of what could have happened if Rex hadn't been here, if she hadn't woken up, sent a wave of nausea through her. Sam exhaled sharply beside her, rubbing a hand over his face. "All right," he muttered. "I've seen enough." Lena swallowed, her throat dry. "What do we do?" Sam turned to Rex, who stood still, his muscles taut, his ears perked forward as if waiting for something. Listening. His body was still positioned between them and the crib, as though whatever had been here hadn't completely left. Sam didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved toward the window, inspecting it closely. "You said it was open last night?" Lena nodded, shifting Noah in her arms. "Just a crack. But I know I didn't leave it that way." Sam reached out, running his fingers along the wooden frame, his brow furrowed. "This lock is old, but it's not broken. If someone tried to force it open, it would have left marks." He turned back to Lena, his expression grim. "This wasn't a break-in." Lena felt her stomach twist. She had known that deep down. Had known that whatever had been in this room hadn't entered through the window, because it had never needed to. She tightened her hold on Noah. "Sam, please, just tell me what's happening." Sam sighed, leaning back against the wall. "I don't know for sure," he admitted. "But I do know Rex. And I know he doesn't react like this unless there's a real threat." Lena looked down at her dog, her protector. Rex was still focused, his breathing steady but deep, his entire body still coiled like a spring. He wasn't convinced the danger was gone. Lena's mind raced, searching for an explanation, something tangible she could hold on to. "You don't really think it was—" She hesitated, feeling ridiculous even as she said it. "Something supernatural?" Sam's jaw tightened. "I think something was here." The weight of his words pressed into her chest. She had spent her whole life believing in logic, reason. She didn't believe in ghosts or spirits, didn't entertain horror stories. But what other explanation was there? Rex had seen it, he had fought it, and he had won. A mother's resolve. Lena turned to the crib, staring at the empty space where Noah had been only hours ago. Her baby, her whole world, had been vulnerable, unprotected, and she hadn't even known it. Her entire body ached with exhaustion, but there was something stronger beneath it now. A fire. She wouldn't let this happen again. "Sam," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I need to know what I'm up against." Sam studied her for a long moment before nodding. "All right," he said, "but first, we're not staying in this house tonight." Lena hesitated. "But, no." Sam's voice was firm. "I know you love this place, but whatever this is, it's not safe. Not for you, and definitely not for Noah." He glanced down at Rex. "Even he knows that." Lena followed his gaze. Rex had moved closer to her, pressing against her legs as if trying to shield both her and Noah. His body was warm, solid, a living barrier between them and whatever still lingered in the corners of the house. Leaving felt like giving up, but staying felt like a mistake. Lena nodded. "Okay." The escape packing was quick. She grabbed only the essentials: diapers, clothes for Noah, her purse. Sam helped, moving through the house with purpose, double-checking the doors and windows. Rex never left her side. By the time they were ready to leave, dawn was breaking. A soft golden light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. Lena hesitated at the threshold, looking back into the house one last time. It should have felt like home. Instead, it felt like something was watching them go. Sam touched her shoulder. "Let's go." She nodded, stepping outside, clutching Noah tightly as Rex followed close behind. The car ride was silent, save for the soft hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of Noah shifting in his sleep. Lena's mind raced with everything that had happened, every strange moment she had brushed off until now. Had this been happening all along? Had something been waiting? Sam's voice pulled her from her thoughts. We'll stay at my place for now. I want to do some research, figure out if there's any history on that house. Lena swallowed. You really think there's something to find? Sam's hands tightened on the wheel. I think there's more to this than we understand. Rex let out a soft huff from the back seat, his head resting beside Noah's car seat. Lena reached down, running her fingers through his fur. Thank you, boy, she murmured. Rex didn't react. He just kept staring out the window, watching the road behind them as if making sure they weren't being followed. The discovery. Sam's house was a small, modest place on the edge of town, tucked between the trees like a hidden sanctuary. It wasn't as big as Lena's, but it felt safe. By the time they arrived, the exhaustion had fully set in. Lena put Noah to sleep in the guest room, leaving Rex curled up beside the crib. Only then did she finally let herself breathe. Sam sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, eyes scanning through pages of text. Lena poured herself a glass of water, leaning against the counter. Find anything? Sam exhaled. I found something. She tensed. What? He turned the laptop toward her. Your house. It's not just old. It has a history. Lena stepped closer, her stomach twisting as she read the article. The house had belonged to a family in the 1950s. A mother, father, and their newborn son. The baby had died in his crib. The mother had sworn something had taken him. But no one believed her. Sam tapped the screen. She claimed she saw shadows in his room, that they moved when they shouldn't. Lena's hands trembled as she traced the words. The article ended with the mother's eventual breakdown. She was institutionalized, her claims dismissed as grief-induced hysteria. But Lena knew better. She turned to Sam, her throat dry. It was real. Sam nodded. Yeah, and whatever took that baby, it wanted yours too. The air between them was heavy with unspoken fear. Rex let out a soft whine from the other room, as if he too knew the fight wasn't over. Lena straightened, her exhaustion replaced with something sharper. Stronger. She had run once, she wouldn't run again. Whatever this was, it had already taken one child. She wouldn't let it take hers. The air in Sam's house felt heavier now, thick with the weight of what they had just uncovered. Lena sat at the kitchen table, her hands clenched together, her thoughts a tangled mess of fear and determination. The newspaper article stared back at her, its yellowed edges and faded ink outlining a story that should have been forgotten. A mother's grief, dismissed as madness, her pain buried beneath decades of skepticism. But it wasn't madness. She hadn't imagined it, just as Lena hadn't imagined the presence in her own home. She felt sick. Rex lay by her feet, his massive body pressed protectively against her legs. Even now he remained vigilant, ears flicking at every sound, muscles taut beneath his thick coat. Sam leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. We can't go back, he said finally. Lena exhaled slowly, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Then what am I supposed to do? Just leave? Let whatever this is win? Sam hesitated, then shook his head. But we need to be smart about this. If this thing has been there for decades, it's not going to stop just because we know about it. Lena's grip tightened. I won't let it take Noah. Sam's expression softened slightly. I know. She looked toward the guest room where her son slept peacefully, unaware of the battle being fought over him. A battle that had already taken another child. A child whose mother had been silenced. Lena's chest tightened with emotion. She wouldn't suffer the same fate. She wouldn't let history repeat itself. She reached down, running her fingers through Rex's fur. You saved him, she whispered. Rex lifted his head, his amber eyes locking onto hers. There was something ancient in his gaze, something knowing, a protector. He had been watching, waiting, and he had acted when she couldn't. Lena swallowed past the lump in her throat. I need to end this. Sam straightened. What are you thinking? Lena looked up, fire replacing the fear in her eyes. I'm going back. A mother's fight, Sam argued. He called her reckless, desperate. But Lena had made up her mind. They couldn't run forever. Whatever had haunted that house wasn't done with them. If they didn't face it now, it would follow them, waiting, lurking in the shadows for another chance. So she would go back, she would confront it, and she would make sure it never touched Noah again. Sam relented, but only under one condition. We do this together, he said firmly, and we do it right. That night they made preparations. Salt, iron, fire, all the old superstitions, all the methods people whispered about in stories. Sam didn't know if they would work, but he wasn't willing to take any chances, and neither was Lena. Rex never left her side. By the time dawn broke, they were ready. The final stand. The house was eerily silent when they arrived. The storm had passed, leaving behind damp earth and a sky that was still heavy with clouds. The air was thick, unmoving. As soon as Lena stepped inside, she felt it. A weight. A presence. It was waiting. Noah stayed with a trusted friend outside of town. This was a fight Lena couldn't risk him being part of. Rex entered first, his body tense, ears alert. He knew the battle wasn't over. Neither did Lena. Sam followed close behind, a bag slung over his shoulder, filled with everything they had gathered. Let's finish this, he muttered. Lena led the way to the nursery. The moment she stepped inside, the temperature dropped. The crib sat empty, untouched. The blankets were still folded neatly, the rocking chair still slightly turned as if someone had just risen from it. The shadows in the corner seemed darker than before. Rex growled. Sam reached into the bag, pulling out a container of salt. He began pouring it along the windows, the doorway, everywhere they needed protection. Lena turned to the empty crib. Her heart pounded. She could feel it. The thing that had taken that other child. The thing that had tried to take Noah. It was still here, and it was angry. A gust of wind rattled the window. The temperature plummeted. Then, a whisper. Low, distant. But there. Lena's blood ran cold. Sam's eyes snapped up. Did you hear that? Lena swallowed. Yes. Rex's growl deepened, his body lowering into a defensive stance. Then, the whisper grew. It curled around the room, slithering through the walls, rising into a breathy, inhuman hiss. Mine. The lights flickered. The air grew thick, suffocating. The shadows in the corner shifted. Rex lunged. His bark shattered the silence, his body launching toward the darkness. His teeth snapped onto nothing, but something moved. A shape, barely visible, shifting through the shadows. Lena grabbed the lighter. She had never believed in ghosts, in spirits, but she believed in fire. She struck the flame, holding it high. You can't have him, she hissed. The shadows recoiled. The whisper turned into a scream. Sam tossed the salt. The grains hit the floor, sizzling against the wood like acid. Rex barked again, snapping at the air. And then, the shadows vanished. The air lightened. The weight was gone. The room fell silent. Lena stood frozen, the flame still burning in her hand. Rex panted, his tail stiff, his eyes still watching. Sam exhaled. It's over. Lena wasn't so sure, but as she looked around the nursery, as she felt the warmth return, she allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that they had won. The aftermath. They left the house that night, not in fear, but because Lena knew she would never sleep there again. Some battles left scars. This one left something deeper. She took Noah and Rex and moved far away. She never looked back. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, when Noah slept peacefully beside her, she would see Rex's ears flick, his body shifting ever so slightly. She knew he was still watching, still waiting, and she knew, with every fiber of her being, that if it ever came back, he would be ready. Because he had always been ready. Because he had always been Noah's protector. Because he had always been hers. The past no longer lived in Lena's home. It had been months since she had packed up what little she could carry, loaded Noah and Rex into the car, and left that house behind. She had sold it without looking back, refusing to spend another second trapped within walls that had harbored something dark, something unnatural. She and Noah had started fresh in a small, quiet town miles away. The kind of place where the nights were calm, the streets felt safe, and the only sounds that filled the nursery were Noah's soft breaths as he slept. But even in this new home, in this new life, Rex still stood guard. Even as Noah grew, learning to walk, to speak, Rex never strayed far from his side. Even as Lena slowly allowed herself to believe that the nightmare was over, Rex never stopped watching the shadows. She knew deep down that he still remembered, and she knew that if the darkness ever tried to return, he would be ready. The power of protection. Not all heroes wear capes. Some walk on four legs. Some wait in silence, watching over the ones they love. Some fight battles that their owners never even realize are being fought. Rex had been more than a protector. He had been a guardian, a soldier, a savior, and Lena would never take that for granted again. She had learned the hard way that there were things in this world that logic couldn't explain. That no matter how much she wanted to believe in reason, there were forces that operated beyond human understanding. But there was one thing she could understand, one truth she would never question again. A German shepherd's loyalty was unbreakable, a German shepherd's love was unwavering, and a German shepherd's protection could save lives. A message to those who listen. Lena's story isn't unique. Maybe you've felt it before, the inexplicable chill down your spine, the feeling of eyes on you when you're alone, the way your dog growls at something you can't see. Maybe you've brushed it off, told yourself it was just the wind, just a creaky floorboard, just an overactive imagination. Maybe it was, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe your dog knows something you don't. Maybe your dog sees something you refuse to believe in. And maybe, just maybe, your dog has already saved you without you ever realizing it. So the next time your loyal companion stands guard at your door, the next time they refuse to leave your side, the next time they growl at an empty room, don't ignore them. Because sometimes the things we can't see are the things that matter most. And sometimes the only thing standing between us and the darkness is them. Final words. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt that unspoken connection with your dog, then don't forget to show them the love they deserve. They protect us, fight for us, love us without question. The least we can do is return that love. Honor their loyalty, cherish their protection, and always, always trust them. Because when the world turns dark, when the unseen forces creep too close, when danger lingers where we least expect it, a German shepherd will always stand between us and the storm, and they will never back down.